Hi, everyone. So good to see you all. Thanks for coming today on this snowy day. I just wanted to say welcome to Imagine Wednesday. If you don't know, my name's Genevieve. I'm the director of the BFA in Creative Writing. We have some wonderful TAs who are going to be reading their creative work for us today. But before we begin and get into the fun stuff, I just wanted to go over a couple of announcements. So we do have some summer courses that we're running. I wanted to make you all aware during session 1, we're going to have a short fiction workshop with Karen Officer, Writing New York City for Writers and Filmmakers. And then during session 2, we're going to have Film 102, which is Intro to Film and TV Composition, how films and TV shows say what they mean. We'll also have Film 215, which could also be Creative Writing 315, Screenwriting for Filmmakers and Creative Writers. So nice classes that, incorporate our film side and our creative writing side for the summer. We're also going to be holding a creative writing major minor drop-in hour session on March 31st. So just keep your eyes peeled for a Zoom invite for that. You would just come in, ask any questions you have about the major or the minor, ask me how many cats I have, whatever. I'll be on Zoom, okay? And finally, if you have not signed in for 202, the sign-in sheets are at the back, okay? So just make sure that you put your John Hancock on there before you move on, all right? Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Cass as our MC today.
Surprise, it's me. First person talking, not the host of the event. It's me, I'm doing it. So, thank you all for braving the snow to make it here today. I'm just gonna get right to it and introduce our first reader, Felix Grigorsevich. Felix is a second year in Stony Brook's Creative Writing MFA program. He's currently teaching a quantum fiction class and is working on a metafiction novel. He tells people he wants his next book to be a story about animals, particularly an orange fox who walks around with an owl on her shoulder. In today's story, there will be a seagull.
I'm going to read this drafty seagull story, then a few poems, because I feel like we could use some poems today. Dead seagull in a bicycle basket. She's pretending she has somewhere to go, a 10-year-old fifth grader riding down the Atlantic City boardwalk in the summer of 1964 on a boy's bicycle painted green. It belonged to her grandfather. They once found a cat skeleton on the beach. She asked him how it got there. He told her it must have fallen from a ship and washed ashore. She hates the bike. All the other girls have girls' bikes with beautiful, bright colors. She has no friends because no one likes her bike. She's alone, pretending she has somewhere to go. She stops at the beach to watch the waves and dip her feet in the water. She finds a dead seagull. She picks it up, places the bird in the basket on the front of the green bike, where her dog used to sit. She rides around town with the bird, as if they have to get somewhere, but all they do is ride. Dusk is slowly settling. She bikes back home and unlatches her basket, taking her friend inside. Her mother sees them and begins to scream at her, washes her hands and demands she throw the thing out. She obeys and brings it back downstairs to the curb, where she reattaches the basket to the bike and rides off back to the beach. The ocean is dark, the sun setting behind her. She rests the goal in the sand, pushing more sand to top it, careful not to touch it again. She cries. She doesn't want to remember this. She wants to be an archaeologist, but she isn't good at school. Her grades are mostly C's, and she doesn't think anyone thinks much of anything of her. She wishes she was smart. She doesn't have any people who believe in her particularly, and no one seems to take her dream of being an archaeologist seriously. It is now many years later. She's all grown up and has children of her own. She watches the History Channel. She's mostly interested in aliens and all the signs that they may have once been among us. Her son tells her a professor of his said, "Aliens are all around us. which he took to mean each person is a universe, all alien to one another. She says this sounds interesting, but it doesn't resonate with her as much as her shows. They have far more specific assertions that are easier to follow. It seems her son is in a sharing mood, so she tells him about the dead seagull, how she pretended to carry it around with her. He asks about where the bird ended up. She tells him she doesn't remember. Okay, now for a poem about the beach. Thank you. On the beach. No worries on the beach. Let your guard down. Be naked. Flaunt even. All your sunken sins dredged and dripped and dropped, forgiven. Transmuted into sanguine sediment, settled upon the saline shore. You can find this only on the beach. It is as if we are reminded by the vastness of the ocean how powerless we are. So we put aside our conflicts, instead choosing to navel gaze beneath the sun. We can forget about the 2-degree goal, the Pandora Papers, less than 2 degrees to midnight. The world is so fucked, sometimes I just want a cigarette, an indulgence concealed by the sea breeze. On the beach, in the sand, like on snow, all things are recorded physically, like music on vinyl, entangled quantum etches, forever ingrained. We can linger until each dune takes on meaning, shaped by the wind, insects, you from weeks ago, us from years ago, us here now. I wish we never had to leave the beach. And one more poem. This is called Crabapple Tree. Crabapples are inedible, too tart to bite twice. The trick, my sister tells me, as we sit on an Airbnb stoop, watching and feeling the last rays of the sun caressing our faces and hands and arms and the tippy-top green branches of an otherwise barren tree, is to let them ripen until right before they're ready to fall. That is the time to harvest. Plucked, the energy of the sun, transmuted into sugar, is fermented in vats, so we remember as we cheers. The alcohol in our glasses is the same drunk generations ago because cider trees aren't bred but grafted, the branch of the present born from a long dead trunk. In this way, we have immortalized a funky apple tree so that we may never lose the taste, so that we may always cherish the memory of basking in these rays. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. I, too, watch the History Channel when I want to hear about aliens. Our next reader will be Erin Fahey. Erin is a second-year grad student in the MFA program. She dabbles in the short story and personal essay forms and is currently at work writing a novel about a group of seniors on a college campus. When not at her keyboard, Erin can be found practicing yoga, playing with her family's golden doodle, or, embarrassingly, watching reruns of Grey's Anatomy.
It's true. I am a sucker for Grey's Anatomy. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from a short story I'm working on called Groomers. Women take care of women, the dames told us. It was a lesson they drilled into us around the fire each night, braiding our hair in their worn, knobbly hands, and in our classroom lessons on birthing and the stages. They sang it to us as we bathed in the lake, teaching us to soap one another's backs and other hard-to-reach places as we tried not to see the wasted folds of skin hanging from their bellies. We said it to each other, too, parroting the dame's words in an air of womanly maturity. When Elephantine Ruby lagged behind the group, or Emma, whose sight had been fading for years, couldn't read the manual pages for homework, Madeline would turn to me and say, "Women take care of women." We'd roll our eyes and turn back down the hill or read the pages aloud or do whatever needed doing to take care of a girl. For though we were only in our girlhood now, someday we would be women. Better to start practicing early, while the stakes were still low, the dames said. The dames took care of us, rearing us from infancy to be the girls we were, so we had no reason to question what they told us. They were our grandmothers, mostly, though occasionally a girl was in the charge of a great aunt, or no one at all if the dame had died and the girl was old enough. They were our flesh and blood, sworn to protect us. But every month, at the ritual grooming, the dames would find a gray hair upon the head of one of the older girls, a steely silver needle nestled among all the dark, and she would be dragged away, screaming, to the alphas. Women take care of women, the dames would shrug, showing us their clean palms. I love asking the older dames about my mother. Not my dam, of course. She was on the other side from my mother's girlhood. But there are still a few dames left who remember my mother as a girl, and it is to their stories that I cling. In my favorite story, the one I asked to be told again and again, my mother collected sticks and fallen branches on the morning walk for 3 weeks. We knew she was up to something, Dame Marge chortles, wiping spittle from the corner of her mouth. We just didn't know how crazy her idea would turn out to be. Dame Marge's eyes are filmed over with a milky substance, and her breath has a stale fustiness that reminds me of the leaves rotting behind the potting shed in autumn. When she opens her mouth to speak, there is a creak, as if her very bones are belching a dusty sigh. But still, I draw close to her, sitting by the hearth at her cloth-slippered feet as she rocks back and forth in her chair, grateful for any morsel of my mother she will share with me. At night, after the fires had been put out, my mother would sneak out of her hovel and into the woods with a bit of stray twine she had nicked from the crafting station. There, away from the dame's watchful eyes, she whittled and bound, joisted and tied, until she had something she hoped was tall enough. I imagine her admiring her creation in the opalescent light of the moon. Sticks and twigs knotted together in a shaky frame, a portal to another world, another life, beyond the pavilion's walls. She would have dragged the ladder softly through the grass to the pavilion's edge, careful to avoid the encampment of hovels to the north, unaware that she was no longer alone. Then she would have propped the ladder against the great wooden wall that rings the pavilion, reinforced over the years so solidly that no girl or dame had ever thought to question its penetrability, and began climbing. How far did she get? Did the top of her head crest the wall's summit, revealing to her the secrets of life on the other side? Or was she only part of the way up, so close, the top within reach, when she felt the crack of snapped twigs below, heard the curdling screams of another girl pierce the night? It was Marian, another from my mother's girlhood. Marian's foot had slipped on the broken rung of the branch, leaving her dangling precariously by one arm. By this point, the dames would have been coming towards the wall, woken by Marian's screams. My mother had a choice to make. She could continue up, and over the wall to whatever discoveries awaited and leave Marian to her fate. Or she could turn around, help the girl down, and face the consequences of her insolence. She chose the latter. The dames had groomed her well. I've never left the walls of the pavilion, have never even wanted to tell the truth. Here we have the pond and the woods, and the meadow that becomes swollen with blossoms in spring, and the gardens with their neat rows of carrots and peas, a testament to the wild fecundity of the earth. We learn about the life cycles of plants out in the fields as we dig and hoe, and then about the life cycles of our gender in the cheerily painted classroom. First girlhood, then womanhood, and finally, a reward and a respite from a life of hard toil, damehood. As girls, we have the freedom to run and play anywhere we want in the pavilion during our free hours. Madeline and I must have covered every square inch of these 20 or so acres some 10 times over. We know where the foxes burrow in the winter and where the bluebirds emerge in spring, lilting the air with their sweet songs. Be grateful for the pavilion, the dames tell us. You're lucky to have what you have. It never occurred to me, to any of us girls really, to want more. Of course, the choice is not ours to make. Someday, soon enough, we will all leave. Yesterday it was Mara's turn. It was time for the dreaded grooming once again. The dames had lined us up in 2 rows, all of us girls who had started menstruating. We were in the usual order, oldest to youngest, which roughly correlates to height, and from my spot in the middle of the line, I could see Mara's coppery red hair glinting in the sunlight up ahead. Katie was in front of me and Madeline in front of her, the 3 of us whispering, with our heads bent together, about who might be taken that day. No one wants to be taken to the other side. Whenever we ask about it, the dames answer us vaguely, talking about hard work and the unpleasantness of living among men. Men, we titter. We've never seen men, only the alphas, from afar, and even them only on grooming days, when they wait astride their horses at the pavilion's gates for whatever girl, or should I say woman, has sprouted a gray hair that month. The very idea of men is incomprehensible and exotic to us, a heady concoction of fear laced with curiosity and dread. But we are curious because we've only been able to piece together so much. We know that when a girl reaches womanhood, that is, when the dames find her first gray hair, she is taken to the other side, and she stays there until she becomes a dame herself. It is the mystery of it all that so intrigues us. So even though no girl wants to be taken to the other side, even though I've never really had the desire to leave the pavilion, we'd be lying if we said the other side didn't hold a certain appeal. And so we, Madeline and Katie and I, look up to the older girls, the ones most likely to be taken away, with something like awe and reverence. They were on the cusp of finding out what we were still years away from learning. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Erin. One of the most exciting things about being part of a small cohort of writers is you get to sometimes see new permutations of the same story as it develops and grows. And this is a story I've heard a couple different versions of, so thank you. Our next writer today will be Rachel Edens. Rachel is an MFA candidate in creative writing and a CWL 202 instructor. She's from the Midwest, has totaled the same car twice in 1 year, and once won $400 playing bingo.
It was $402. I'm going to read you guys a nice little prose poem. It's going to be a little short. It's called But For Now. He's in the back garden, sitting on the pale decorative stone, drawing with chalk between his spread legs. Sun shines on the back of his neck and warms the exposed skin there. His jaw hangs a bit, letting his mouth slip open as he concentrates. There is not a single thought in his head, no anxiety, no fretting. It is just him and his chalk, him and this tiny thing he controls. There are green and pink smudges on his hairless legs, blue fingerprints dot his face. His little brother has fallen asleep in the grass near him. He looks over to see the rise and fall of his brother's jersey-clad chest, and he does not worry, because he can see his brother, and his brother is there, safe. He smears the last line he drew with his 2 fingers. It is art. It is scribbles. He smiles. His mother has not called him in yet. He's in the back garden, drawing with chalk between his spread legs. It is the foundation of a memory, though he does not know it.
Thank you, Rachel. That's a killer ending. Our next reader is going to be Ariana McLean. Ariana is teaching creative nonfiction this semester to a group of very talented Wolfie writers while working on her thesis for the MFA program, a cross-genre collection of shorts. While she grew up in Maryland, she's become a naturalized New Yorker after a decade of living and working in Brooklyn as a TV and film freelancer. And later tonight, she will be hosting Writers Speak Wednesday featuring Donnie Walton.
Thank you. Sorry about my super, I felt like it was like a boring bio that I sent, very professional. I also have a pet rabbit, and I like binge watching YA content on Netflix. So today I'm gonna read a couple flash pieces and then end with a poem, kind of all different types of love. The Lover's Escape. I dissociated again. From the third-story window of the Marriott, I found myself arguing with Lenny in the parking lot. He'd called me a whore, but I wasn't arguing about that. No, I was begging him not to leave. There they were before me, a young couple believing they were some sort of Romeo and Juliet. He'd been in and out of jail, never giving her the full story. She was a college student with a full merit-based scholarship to a good school. She thought this was love, that longing, that heartbreak, that combativeness, that burn. She'd mistaken it all for passion. No one wanted them to be together. In fact, her friends and family held a sort of intervention about it earlier that month. Instead, she converted their love for her into fuel to stoke the flames of this star-crossed relationship. Don't leave like this, she begged. Why was he mad? What had she done? She couldn't remember. The only thing she was sure of, or thought she was sure of, was that she needed him. She didn't want him to leave. She hadn't made him a better man yet. The longer I watched, the more I felt sad for them. Their desperation was sticky and foul-smelling. The weather turned gray all around them. Eventually, the arguing and crying turned into an overcompensated display of public affection. She gave herself to him, she dulled while he grew brighter. Then they returned to the hotel room they'd booked for the weekend. This one's called, this is kind of untitled. My best friend and I didn't speak for a year. I took a stand and she slammed the door on her way out. The night ended in a film reel of our friendship playing back in my mind. Black, white, sepia tone emotions bottled up over a lifetime, bubbled out as I drank cheap champagne from the bottle. Then one year later, we met up for Korean barbecue. We brought our seconds as buffers. Her sister, my husband, we ate and sang karaoke. We shot Jameson and sipped on scotch. We made up in Washington Square Park like a goddamned romantic comedy, sharing a Marlboro, sitting on the edge of the fountain drained for the winter at 2 a.m. Tears waterfall down our faces. If not for our flushed cheeks, they would have froze like icicles. So when I read her text tonight, I am surprised. Our renewed friendship is still fresh and delicate, but she said she was in the ER. She'd hurt her partner and she'd hurt herself. When I call, she cries to me through the phone about all that she's lost, all that she's ruined. I know for the first time she's seeing herself through sober eyes. I listen and fight the urge to lighten the mood. This is heavy, I think. This is a confession, and I'm no nun. I'm no priest. I stay with her on the phone as she waits to get stitches. She'd started the fight. She'd been drinking and smoking, she admits, inviting a new level of honesty into our guarded gates. But as she tells me her truth, I think of all the things I've withheld. I've put up my own walls. I've forgotten our friendship, its depths, its longevity, its scars. So I guess I have two more. Dressing my mother-in-law. We picked out a pair of white jeans and a pink floral shirt from her overflowing closet. They are new with the tag still on. She likes pink, my sister-in-law tells me. She's the better sister-in-law. She'd tell her suegra lovingly while I struggled with what to say. Instead, we'd greet each other with a hello, how are you, and then slip into nervous smiles, waiting to see who'd start the conversation first. I'd freeze in my own self-consciousness, knowing how poor my Spanish was, and she'd do the same for her English. Why did we care so much if we flubbed a word? The mortician said we need to provide undergarments, my husband reminds me in a text. I show my sister-in-law, who finds a clean but worn wireless bra. This will be comfortable. I nod. We are solemn in our task, focused in concealing our emotions. My suegra always wore these, she continued, pointing to a pair of brown loafers. I picked them up and placed them next to the outfit we've laid out on the bed she shared with her husband. He won't sleep there. For the last few days, he's been staying at my sister-in-law's on the couch. I think that looks really nice, I say. All right, one last one. I'll end on a poem, kind of like Felix. Love in the time of grief. Your body is a hearth, warming my ever-cold limbs, and all I want is to warm your heart with my big kisses. I try and digest your demons so you don't twitch restlessly, stuck in nightmares. Your loss is my loss, but your loss is also your loss, and the loss is also my own. And how do I reconcile these tears and fears I feel, you grasping without words, searching for a lifeline? But I don't know how to make the right knots to ensure you don't drown. So I just keep my head on your chest, my fingers outlining your tattoo of the lone wolf, your heart, the baseline that grounds me. But how can I ground you when we both know how impermanent it all is?
Thank you, Ariana. Thank you. Like the narrator of your second piece, I often find myself fighting the urge to lighten the mood. So we're gonna end with some of my work. Am I shutting this off? No. I used to be an amateur stand-up comedian, and what I would find was that the sleaziest comedy producers would either host their own shows or headline their own shows, meaning perform at the end. So you get to decide what it says about me that I'm doing both of those things. My name is Cassidy. I'm a fiction writer, poet, and lover of anything that breaks genre rules. This summer, I'm teaching the Intro to Creative Writing class and a prose poetry workshop. And today, I'll be reading a series of short pieces. This one is called Ant Twin. There are as many ants on Earth as people, by weight, which means logically that every person on the planet has an ant twin, made up of millions of specific ants who would all, if they could just get together in one place, weigh the same amount as each and every one of us. I'm building a glass case for my ant twin, me-shaped but smaller because a mass of crawling ants would be denser than my body, with all its air pockets and water and fat. Human beings are almost 50% excess space, and we're weaker for it, unable to lift even 2 or 3 times our own weight. My human body disgusts me, but I will outgrow it when I see my ant twin, when I've gotten it all into one place, when I've put all the ants together into my own shape, when I watch my ant twin rise up out of the casing, stretching its crawling limbs, learning to speak with my mouth, blinking its eyes at me until they become mine. I will remain silent while my ant twin finds its feet on my floor, plants them, walks up the stairs out of my basement and leaves without saying goodbye, never asking me to follow it out of my house because it knows that I never will. I do not belong in its world. This one is called High-Stakes Tennis Games, where your housekeepers point guns at you the whole time. The thing Roseanne said immediately after committing involuntary manslaughter was, "Whoops!" She didn't know that Richard was dead right away, but she knew that the gun in her hand had gone off, and a second later he was face down on the tennis court with all the blood from his head starting to spread out and getting ready to seep into the clay. Paxton was running toward Richard's body from the other side of the court, stumbling over the net and breathing hard. He just stared at Roseanne while he did it. Didn't scream, didn't say anything, like if he spoke, he would somehow come up with a worse verbal response than Roseanne had. Behind him, Alana, the other housekeeper, put down her gun and started tossing clusters of now irrelevant tennis balls back into the hopper. Paxton made this urgent face, kept snarling between the back of Richard's head as he checked his friend's pulse and the trigger-happy housekeeper behind him. He made sputtering, angry noises at her, and they were about as loud as the trees rustling around the yard in the wind, roughly as threatening as the sounds of his tennis shoes smacking the ground when he ran over. The hopper rattled somewhere nearby as Alana filled it up. The puddle of blood around Richard's head got bigger in silence. By the time Paxton's noises congealed into a series of gestures pantomiming a phone call and pointed in the rough direction of the house, Roseanne was already running. Unlike Alana, Roseanne never dropped her gun. She didn't trust herself to stop it from firing again if it wasn't in her hand. Eventually, she would need 2 hands to use the good brush, the one that might only take 6 to 8 hours of scrubbing to remove any trace of the blood after the area was power washed a few times. Roseanne knew she was minutes away from getting fired and that one day she would end up in prison, but it never occurred to her that she might lose her job without being asked to clean the blood off the tennis court first. Roseanne barged into the kitchen through the back door, armed. Richard's wife and Paxton's husband put down their wine and looked up from their chess game, and their faces told Roseanne that neither of them were aware anything had happened. She couldn't make sense of this for several breaths, until she did. Soundproof homes were a trend among the wealthy lately, just like heated roofs and custom-shaped clouds and high-stakes tennis games where your housekeepers point guns at you the whole time. Roseanne realized it was now her job to communicate. She wanted to assure them that it was an accident, or to tell them to call an ambulance, or just scream sob and hope they got it. But all she could do was gesture wildly toward the tennis court and say the same word over and over again. Whoops, 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 whoops. But she didn't fire her gun this time, so her words were the loudest thing in the room. And this last one is called Genies. I hide in my house now, looking through the blinds from the upstairs window where I can see genies on the street corners. There are all the stop signs where in the past you could only see crying kids, back in the years when urban legend held that if you left brakes stopped and launched yourself off your bike at one very particular sign, it would hold you in the air, just hold you. And for an hour you might feel like you were flying, if not moving. And every kid tried every sign, and the blood of our hands and knees stained the grass. But now there are genies, and the red grass is covered by the blue-green smoke that convulses below them. And kids can wish for air and for flying. And here, in my house, I can't wish for anything. I'd like you to keep it going for the rest of our readers as well. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, that was incredible. That was some of the best writing I've ever heard. But I have questions. And that's why we're opening the floor to a brief Q&A period if you have any questions for our writers in specific or in general. Yes, in the front row. Oh, don't bring it there.
Yeah, it might rain.
Oh, really?
Okay. Just talk loud.
Hi, my name's Genevieve. I'm the director of the BFA. So I have questions for Aaron and for Cassidy. So for Aaron, both of you, actually, I wanted to know where you got the inspiration for your work. So Aaron, I don't know if there was something that informed it. And Cass, I had the same question for you specifically about the ant-sized body weight thing. That was so wonderfully weird. So.
Is that true about ants?
Sure.
I was grossed out by that, but in the best way possible. I think I have a weird complex about gray hairs because I found my first one when I was like 12 or something like that. And I was taking a dystopian class with Felix and Cass. And Rachel, were you in that class? Yeah. And I needed to write something and I didn't know what to write about. And then I got out of the shower and saw like a fresh crop of gray hair. And I was like, wow, I'm getting old. And then it just sort of came from there. Like, what would the consequences be in a dystopian society if your worth or something was measured by the amount of gray hairs you had? Because I would have been gone. Like, I would have been one of the first goners if that was the case. So that's where that came from.
Thank you. The inspiration for the Ant Twin piece specifically was, I don't know if that fact is true, but it is something that I was told, and I just started to think, okay, if the sum total of ants weighs the same amount as the sum total of people, well, the first line of the piece, I came up with that and just sort of ran with it. I wish I could say it was more complex than that, but... do we have other questions from folks about the pieces that you've heard or about writing in general?
I feel like someone has to ask a question, so I'm just
pursue your master's in creative writing?
Who would like to start that one?
Felix says.
Oh, can you repeat the question? No, that's a great question. I think for me, I was at a point where I had then been working in publishing for a number of years, and kind of dabbling in my writing after undergrad, but never taking it seriously any further. And then I moved from Boston to California, so I was all over the place, and it simply occurred to me at a point in time that whatever I was doing with my life, writing had to be a very large part of it. And I was not yet in a place where I could simply pull a Murakami and like give up smoking, start running every day and do it. Like I needed some guidance. So that's part of, I began looking into grad school and then decided that that was sort of the decision for me was to just get myself closer to writing, closer to teaching students, the learning behind writing and all that encompasses that world. So that's my long-winded answer.
I think I have sort of a similar one. I worked in publishing for a bit too. Then I was working as a copywriter. So all these sort of like fiction writing adjacent things, but I was really afraid. And it took me most of my 20s to realize like I can still be afraid, but I would rather try this now and maybe fail at it versus like being like 50 or something and then feeling like I had missed my chance. Like this was what I had always wanted to do and I felt like I should just go for it. And when you're working full time, it can be really, especially if you're working in any sort of like writing adjacent capacity, it can be really hard to then find the time and the energy to work on your own creative projects. So I knew I was going to have to go to a program that would like hold me accountable, give me deadlines, like create like a space or a container that I could actually spend time doing this because I'm just not as disciplined enough to do it on my own. So, yeah.
So I guess my story is very much and in addition to what you guys said, I worked in TV and film, primarily in production management. So that's like all the logistics and stuff, making other people's creativity and dreams come true. And I was just burnt out and I felt like something was missing in my life. I took a couple writing classes at the Gotham Center, and I was like, oh yeah, I used to love writing. And then from there, it sort of snowballed. I started looking up different programs, and this is my, I guess, shined up story, that I kind of applied on a whim to Stony Brook. I was working at a job that had a lot of downtime. I was just sort of sitting in this cold office waiting for animators to send me their stuff. And I was like, oh, I'll just work on my application here. And so I did, and I have no regrets. It was the first class I remember. I was like, oh my God, it's so great to just fully be immersed in learning and talking about writing and talking about books and writing as well. So, the end.
It was a good story. You should have wrote that one up there. My parents said they would support me as long as I was in school, and I didn't want to give that up yet. So I was like, let's just keep going. No. I always wanted to teach, and I always wanted to write, and you can't teach writing unless you have an MFA, as well as you can't write unless you have guidance. I guess you can, but I couldn't. And a lot of the faculty here are people who are very admirable and invaluable. Even to this school, the school does not pay them enough. Amazing school. So I was like, I have to get in here or I will simply do nothing else.
Thank you for all those answers. So in order to try to give, possibly the most helpful answer I can, to anybody who is thinking about deciding whether or not they're interested in an MFA, I would like to just say up front, my reasons were terrible. I applied while I was still finishing undergrad, largely because I knew I wanted to write and I didn't know what else I wanted to do. And so I would say that if that's where you are in your last year of college, don't apply to grad school for that reason. I think that it is better to spend some time figuring out if this is, if the type of program you're looking for is exactly what you want to do, and then applying if you are not at that place yet. I think that being in an MFA program is great. It's great to just be surrounded by all of these terrific writers. It's great to have the opportunity to teach here. I love teaching, see some of my students here. But yeah, I would say, headline for my answer, don't apply to graduate school for the reasons that I did.
But it worked out.
Sure. All right, that might be it then. Everybody, let's have another round of applause for our readers today.